You have a very good chance.
I'm all right.
No, I mean,
I got a gravel pit and gravel floors. Oh, yeah.
And I got a bonus. I made only a bandit last night.
Not the last few times, but I've been down there. Yeah.
You see,
It's a whole nother museum.
chaotic.
Yeah. And he used to come down to my shop every Christmas. Like, I don't want this. You know, you're up there having a drink and stuff.
Guy looks for
I'm on a board of directors.
Okay.
Past president.
Yeah.
Board of directors. And I'm a selection committee.
I'm pretty precise. You said that you're coming. Well, I got to get some things taken care of. So I said, well,
when I was at Waterford, when they allowed me to stay in my van.
Yeah, that was nice.
That was pretty neat, right? So all my videos have you in the back, and then when I beat my horn by accident and you were waving, I put that on. I put that on my Twitter or whatever you call it now. I put that on there, and a lot of people, hey, there's Bill. There's Bill.
I wasn't back in your vehicle.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we would like to have our Hall of Famers that are in attendance begin to make their way to their tables. So we will begin with first, the 2001 inductee, Mr. Fred Rosner. Class of 2004, Billy Harmon. Class of 2008, Dr. Dick Bergen. Also, class of 2008, Mr. Pete Zanardi. Class of 2009, Bobby Dragon. And Bobby is not in attendance. So the class of 2009, Raleigh Lindblad. Class of 2010, Bob Garbarino. Class of 2011, Skip Matzak. Class of 2013, Stan Meservey. Class of 2014, Mike Rowe. Class of 2014, R.A. Silva. Class of 2015, Lou Boyd. Class of 2016, Ken Bouchard. Class of 2017, Rick Fuller. Class of 2018, Mr. Butch Elms. Class of 2019, Ed Flimke Jr. Class of 2019, Rick Marisal. Class of 2019, Mr. Mike Joy. Class of 2021, Jeff Horn. Class of 2021, John Spence. And please welcome the widows of former inductees. First, Paula Bouchard. And now the First Lady of Auto Racing, Maggie Summers. our 2023 veteran inductees, Al Hammond and his widow Dolores Hammond, Joe Howard, your class of 2023, John Steiger, represented by Marion Howard. Ted Marsh. Mr. Mike Ordway. Mike Whedon. Brad Layton. And finally, Andy Santerre. And at this time, I'd like to welcome to the microphone the president of the New England Antique Auto Racers, April May Preston.
Welcome, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the 2023 New England Auto Racers 25th Annual Hall of Fame induction ceremony. This banner class of inductees into the Hall of Fame will put us at over 270 racing legends that we've recognized since our first celebration in 1998, held in West Springfield, not 15 miles down the road. I'm humbled and honored to say the least, to represent this organization as your first female president in 42 years, and thank all of our former presidents for the great work they've done. I'm dedicated to this organization, and I take this responsibility very seriously. I know most of you support the change in the regime, and I'm sure there are some who are adjusting to a female at the helm. And to you both, I say thank you, and I accept the challenge. It is with a collaborative effort of all of our club members that we are looking to ensure that we're still relevant for the next 40 plus years and able to continue to celebrate together the history of auto racing in New England as it evolves. With changes, there's always an element of the same, and while things might be a little bit different here today, we all know we need to keep up with technology. I hope you notice some of the little things that we brought back. I need to thank the selection committee for their continued dedication and commitment to ensure that we have the best group of inductees each year to bring into the Hall of Fame. I need to thank the great volunteers for their assistance in pulling this event together. And I wasn't going to mention names, but I need to especially thank Sid DiMaggio for all his help this year. Between the two of us, it's a wonder we ever got anything done because we're both very anal, but I guess it's a good thing to the details. So thank you, Sid, for helping me make this a reality. You do an amazing job. Without all of you, we wouldn't be here now, so thank you. A person either loves racing or truly loves racing. This room is filled with those that truly love racing. We have 20, because I missed 2, former inductees, 2 widows of former inductees, past presidents, board members, and all but 2 of our selection committee, and a great group of car guys and gals here today to help with the celebration. In the accomplishments of the 8 incredible men who we have a positive impact on the world of auto racing in New England that we're recognizing. Our legacy is why we are here. The present is our responsibility to preserve that legacy and at the same time keep working to keep our future relevant. With all of us together, we can ensure that NEAR is here for years to come. I hope each of you has a wonderful day today as we celebrate our veteran inductees, Al Hammond and Joe Howard, and the class of 2023, John Steiger, Ted Marsh, Mike Ordway Sr., Mike Whedon, Brad Layton, and Andy Santerre. Thank you.
At this time, we'll be showing a memoriam video to all our members, drivers that have passed in the past year since we had our last Hall of Fame induction ceremony. At this time, I'd like to invite up to the podium Paula Bouchard and Ann Flimke Jr. as they will present the Ron Bouchard Award.
It's great to see all of you here today supporting NEAR. Congratulations to those being inducted this year to the NEAR Hall of Fame. You will be joining a elite group of people. This year's Ron Bouchard Lifetime Achievement Award goes to a man who never let life's obstacles get in his way. His love of racing transcended his everyday difficulties. This year's award goes to Ricky Roduca. Eddie will be talking about him.
Well, to use some advice from my friend Mike Joy, you're supposed to start with a joke. So this is one time starting on the pole really sucks. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today and for supporting this great event. And thank you, Paula, for trusting me to speak on behalf of the Bouchard family. This year's recipient is quite different and unique. I believe this will be the first race fan to be honored this way, but Rick Paducah isn't just a race fan. He's a race fan who managed to find a way to support himself while he helped race teams support themselves by connecting them with sponsors. I first met Rick in 1972, his sophomore year at New Britain High School. He was a seemingly carefree, long-haired, quick-witted kid buzzing around in his wheelchair like he owned the place. We ran into each other a few times, and in one of our chats, he mentioned he went to the races at Plainville Stadium, and my father was one of his favorites. And an instant bond was formed. Knowing I was a Flemke, he took full advantage of asking me every question possible, and the questions never seemed to end. One day, I turned the tables on him and said it was my turn to ask him some questions. I wanted to know what made him who he was and how he coped with his world. He gladly answered my questions, and our friendship grew ever stronger. I'd like to share a couple of conversations we had with you. Rick told me how invisible he felt, even though everyone obviously saw him, but they usually never took the time to interact with him. Most people would stare, but when eye contact was made, they would either look away or smile politely or nod and go on their way. I didn't really want to believe this, but he insisted what he was saying was true. Then he said to me, "I'll prove it. Stay right here and watch." By the way, we were in the lobby of a McDonald's restaurant at this time. Rick wheeled away over to where people were waiting in line and flipped himself out of his wheelchair onto the floor. He just lay there for about 10 or 15 seconds and then quietly started to moan and asking for someone to help him. Well, most looked away. Some smiled politely, then looked away. One actually asked him if they could call someone for him, but no one actually helped him. Having seen enough, I went over and helped him get back in his wheelchair. That lesson will stick with me forever. We traveled a lot together in the mid-'80s, running not only the SK Modified, but also the IMSA GTP light car owned by Paul Crazzo. Many long trips were made those years along the East Coast, taking toll on Ricky's body. To help him be more comfortable in the hauler, I built him a custom seat and mounted it between the two front seats in our cube van. We were hoping it would help him feel better longer, but eventually the discomfort would creep in and his whining and complaining would amp up. It seemed we couldn't stop enough for him at times. One trip, he was complaining way more than usual, and even after we threatened him that if he didn't stop, we were going to leave him on the side of the road, it just kept coming. He wouldn't stop. Finally, I had enough. And without thinking, I elbowed him in the chest and said, "That's it. We're leaving on the side of the road." Now he was yelling at me, using language I can't repeat here, and said, "Sorry, I think you broke my ribs, you jerk," and vowed he would pay me back somehow. Needless to say, we stopped at the very next rest area to take care of his needs. Thank you. Thanks, sorry. Now, our usual routine was I would get out of the van, get his wheelchair out, go get him, carry him to his chair, put him in his chair, and go do our thing. But this time, to save time, I just picked him up and carried him into the restroom. After he was ready, I picked him up and headed to the exit door. Well, just as I got to the door, he grabs the divider and starts yelling, "Help! Help! He's trying to kidnap me. Somebody call the cops." Well, as you can imagine, I'm thinking this isn't going to end well. Next thing I know, this guy comes over and opens and holds the door for me. No questions, no cops, smiling, and walked away. Once again, no one actually helped. With this being said, Rick has always said the racing people never made him feel this way and always offered to help him any way they could. Racing is where he felt most at home and appreciated. One of our other conversations we had way back then was that people with his condition usually wouldn't live to celebrate their 30th birthday. Wow. At that time, Rick was 15. Our conversation came to an uncomfortable pause. Then, to break that silence, I jokingly said, "Well, Ricky, usually the best part of a 30-lap race is the last 15 laps. We somehow managed to laugh it off. But now I'm thinking they were wrong. Somehow, Rick, you've turned that 30-lapper into the 1973 Spring Sizzler." Thank you for letting me share these life lessons with our racing family, Rick. And thank you for never giving up. You are the absolute definition of perseverance. Now it is with great pride I turn the floor over to this year's recipient of the Ron Bouchard's Lifetime Achievement Award, Rick Viduka.
To Skip Matzik and to Paul Bouchard for thinking of me and believing in my work to be inducted with the Ronnie Bouchard Lifetime Achievement Award. I don't actually remember when my addiction to racing began, but I think it had a lot to do with my grandfather and uncles giving me Matchbox cars each time I was a patient at Newington Hospital for crippled children. By the time I was 8 or 9 years old, I had a pretty good sizable collection of Indy cars, Grand Prix, and Can-Am cars. Where we lived in New Britain, we could easily hear the noise from Plainville Stadium. It was a sound I really wanted to get closer to. So one Saturday, my dad brought me to the races, and believe it or not, I was really disappointed. The cars at Plainville had dents, they had holes, they smoked, and they crashed. They were nothing like my miniature Matchbox. But early next season, a friend that I had known from the track invited me to go with him and his dad. Now I was at the races with boys my age. And as a kid in a wheelchair in the early 60s, not only did that night change my perception of racing, it began a dramatic shift to my entire life. In 1976, I'd saved enough money to finally begin building a van that I could drive. The Department of Motor Vehicle didn't have anything for my level of disability, so my mom had to be my driving instructor. We drove mainly in parking lots and side streets, and we would go to the Sherry Cup race shops early in my driving career. When it was time for me to go on the highway, I asked my mom if we could go to the Flunky family's race workshops in East Hartford. So we went that day, and as I'm at Raceworks showing off my van, my mom reading her book, Eddie Flunky Sr. comes over and says, "Hey, next week we're going to Seekonk if you'd like to come along with us." So that was a pretty cool thing. The next Saturday, that morning, I drove slow, my first solo, to the Manchester Sand and Gravel shops. It was a big train station thing there. And that's where we met. And I didn't want to waste anybody's time, like here. but I opened my van doors, I opened the lift, I'm getting out. And as I'm doing that, everybody starts jumping in. Eddie Jr., Kenny Bouchard, and I think Bob Bruno, the engine guy. And then finally, Eddie Flunky Sr. gets into the passenger seat and says, "Okay, we're all set." I wasn't going to tell him I only driven 30 miles and 20 miles of it on the highway, you know. So, but everything went fabulous. We went to Seekonk. On the way there, Eddie didn't give me any backseat driving, any of that. He would tell me where the best restaurants were, where to stop for ice cream, and then where the cops might be hiding if I ever got into that speed limit. So now there was a way, Eddie would tell me a lot of things over the next, ride that we did. But then when we got to Seekonk, he introduced me to Ronnie Bouchard. I learned about his kindness and how good it was to be around somebody with his stature. And from then on, I wanted to follow him wherever he raced. We went Trenton and Pocono and of course Seekonk. I didn't have to follow him to Stafford because I live near Stafford. But these days, that desire to go and watch Ronnie, it demonstrated to me that I was capable of driving anywhere, anytime that I wanted to. As I look over this room, my mind goes back to a lot of conversations. Goes back to meeting with a lot of racers and even working with a lot of the people that are here. I've worked with 13 different Hall of Famers that are in this room today. And it's really good to know that I'm now finally a part of this community. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to welcome Mr. Mark Alden to the stage, and he will present the Frank Marotta Jr. Award.
Okay, this first award, well-deserved. Lloyd Hutchinson Jr. from from Vermont. He couldn't be here today. He's not feeling well. But Lloyd is my hero, a great, great guy. Vermonter with strong interest in the knowledge of the state's racing history. Lloyd was instrumental in putting Thunder Road together. He was one of the original developers with him, helping Ken Squire build Thunder Road. He's a 7th generation Vermonter and 12th generation New Englander. His interest in racing is deep because in 1947, when as a 10-year-old kid, he attended his first race at the Dog River Fairgrounds. He has served in many roles: scorekeeping, handicapper, chairman, rules committee, tech inspector, builder, owner of race cars and drivers. Lloyd has assembled a great collection of Flathead V8 Coupes and Mobile Photo Museum. He's a member of the Near Hall of Fame Selection Committee and is a valued member of the Near Hall of Fame Selection Committee. Great guy. And Lloyd couldn't be here tonight, but Doug Farrell is going to accept his award for him.
Thank you, Mark. So Lloyd called me this morning, said that as much as he would like to be here today, he was feeling under the weather, wasn't going to be able to make it, and he asked me if I'd be willing to come up and accept this award for him. I can't think of a more deserving person to receive this award, so I told him I would be honored to do that. Most of you in the room today know how much Lloyd has meant to Near through the years. I don't think anybody has done more to help promote the history of auto racing in northern Vermont than Lloyd. So again, my wife Jo and I would not have the car that we have if it weren't for Lloyd, and I think a lot of people can say the same thing. So it is my honor and privilege to accept this award on behalf of Lloyd Hutchins.
This is the Rada Mitchell Media Award. And boy, these two people deserve this award more than anybody. Carrie Stratton and Lou Boyd, Coastal 181. We all buy their books. We all read their books on the cold winter days. Unbelievable. Unbelievable people who have just done a fantastic job keeping the history of auto racing alive. And behind every good man, they say there's a successful woman, and Kerry is that woman for Lou. They started with a dirt modified from Kenny Schumacher, who helped Lou Boyd move towards the dream of someday winning a Fonda Speedway feature event. In return, when Schumacher realized his health was declining, he reached out for Lou's help. He called Lou to say he'd had a full life and if he could do a story about him. Get a tape recorder, Lou says, I'm on my way. From Schumacher's audio tapes and meetings with Kenny, Lou wrote a book called The Shoe. With Jim Rigney as the publisher, the book sold well and led to the creation of Coastal 181, the Newburyport, Mass. Publisher that has since produced more books about New England auto racing than any other person in the world. These life stories in a form of yesterday's New England racing stars include Bentley Warren, Dave Dion, Eddie Flemke, Bugsy Stevens. Join a book Lou penned on the Bowler family, Old Blue, race cars. Coastal 181 has published many beyond New England, including the Star Cross, Tobias family, Parnelli Jones, and two of Kenny Schrader. Lou's wife, Carrie, who always answers the phone when you call, and Joyce Standridge are the major players at Coastal. Standridge has laid out Coastal's books for over 10 years, Lou's wife, Carrie, has said. This is her company. She lets me write books, Carrie, an English major at Harvard, got involved when the company she worked moved to California. She says she fell into a role at Coastal. It's perfect for our skills, our personalities. It's been a completely joyful experience. She runs the store and edits every word at every Coastal procedure. Coastal website lists the books, racing books that carry include Lou's photo of the day, pictures of the brief caption. To date, there have been over 3,300 entries. Both Boyds love racing. It shows the copy he's created, the high-quality content, the results from Kerry's labor, and as a driver, Lou. Lou was a big winner in Westboro, big car era, when he wasn't rolling over. Kerry is a big winner in her own rights with her hands on the wheel at Coastal. So at this time, Lou, Kerry, come on up for the Rada Mitchell Memorial Award.
So here's the deal. Mark had one thing right. This is Carrie's company. There's no doubt about it. She just does everything. She does let me write books and pack them, but everything else is Carrie. And you know, sometimes it gets to me a little bit. I did race for 45 years, and I was a backyard racer at all the little tracks. but I met a lot of people, and I love racing people. And recently, I was out walking in western New England, very rural, and I went by an old property that had some square tops sitting out front. And I heard some guy in the garage, so I walked up and I said, "Hey, what are you up to?" "What's in it for you?" he says. And I said, "Well, I'm from Newburyport. I got a couple of those myself. And I see that one you're building might have been a stock car once." And he said, "Yeah, it would have been. It's got a parallelogram in the frame." And he began to warm up finally, and then he looked at me and he said, "I think I know who you might be. You might be connected to that friend of mine, Carrie, with Coastal 181. And so, what can you say? And all I can say at this point is that for those 45 years I raced, if she hadn't been working retail and she had come with me, we would have had the right gears, the right tires, and we really would have won some races. But I tell you, I don't care. I love her to pieces. And there's one other thing she did ask me to do besides writing books and packing them. And she said, "Do the talking for me today." Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much.
Lou. Get out of the way. At this time, we will be having our Veterans Committee inductions. And I'd like to introduce John Pettengill and welcome him to come up to the podium.
I wrote this for Al about 3 weeks ago, and everything seemed to be rolling good. And we had a situation a couple of weeks ago. I'm from Maine, along with a lot of others you saw here. And I just want to take a moment and thank all you folks, the members in NEAR and the racing community, for their prayers, blessings, and well wishes for the folks of Lewiston, Maine. We are all a family of racers, crews, and fans. We're all together. Thank you. Moving on, Al Hammond's illustrious 45-year racing career began in 1964. He has raced on the short tracks of Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Connecticut, and Massachusetts, where he has collectively had 10 wins. But Oxford Plains Speedway was home for Al, and he won 81 out of his career 91 victories. He captured 3 track championships, 1970, 1972, 73, and 3 Triple Crown Series titles, 1967, 1970, and 1973. In 1991, Al was presented the Promoters Cup for his accomplishments in and contributions to the sport. Al had the opportunity to race on the high banks of Daytona on 3 occasions for Dick Bear. Once in the Grand National Division, twice in the Late Model Division Series. He also competed in NASCAR Cup Series at Trenton, New Jersey Speedway for Bob Greeley. And a little story that just comes with that I found interesting was, on the Trenton race, Bob Greeley qualified the car Saturday, where Al had his duties committed to his home track at Oxford. Upon finishing his race, as it so happens being the last feature of the night, Al loaded his car for the crew to take home, did a quick cleanup, and headed for Trenton. One thing you have to keep in mind here is that Al had never been to Trenton, New Jersey, not even set foot on it, the track. 8.5+ hours and a nap in between, Al made it to Trenton. Story has it that the race he was supposed to be in had just started and Bob Greeley was driving. At the first caution, Bob brought the car in, gave the seat to Al, and off he went. Again, never have driven on that track. At the end of the day, Al finished 16th. In 2009, Al was inducted to the Maine Motorsports Hall of Fame. A true racer, a man who took his sport seriously, enjoyed the ride along the way. A gentleman who was loved by many of his fans, admired by racing enthusiasts in Maine and New England. And and the racer who put the black and gold #1 to the front. It is now my honor to induct Al Hammond to the 2023 Near Hall of Fame. And now if I can have his son Ryan Kane come up and accept the award.
They're just getting started. They don't know how this works quite yet. I didn't think I was going to be starting off this show, but here we are. And as I look over this room of people, I'm absolutely humbled myself and for the memory of my father. It reminds me of when he was inducted into the main, Vintage Race Car Hall of Fame. We were all sitting over there wanting to say, what was he going to say? What is he going to say? For those of you who knew my father, knew he was not one to waste a lot of words. He could communicate a point pretty sharply when necessary, and he could deliver pretty much anything he had to say with just a handful of words. But he stood up there that day and let us all have it. Explained the history of his racing career and the highlights, and told a wonderful story about all the support that he had along the way that led him to the point where he was on that given night. I might tell you a little different story from my perspective. I don't have a whole lot of experience in his racing career. Most of his, heyday was well before I was born. But that doesn't change anything. I knew the man, as many of you did. One of the most humble men that you could meet, but fierce at the same time. As I said before, he could cut you like a knife with just a couple of words, and then he could greet you like a true friend and brother with just a smile. As John said, he was a true gentleman of the sport, and there's no doubt about it. Other parts of the story that you might not be aware of is the fact that along his path in the early 70s and into the 80s, he had a number of very interesting opportunities that were handed his way. But interestingly enough, they just didn't fall into the windows as we know them today. After that race at Trenton, he got the attention of a number of people, and they had approached him about going down south, and pursuing some opportunities that may be down there. And, going down south at those times wasn't what it is today. And it wasn't anything he was really interested in, considering the fact that he was the king of Oxford Plains at the time, and that was something that he was not willing to walk away from. And he was the king of Oxford Plains for a good long time. And the record stands for itself. Another interesting thing is that he may, as I've heard it, may have been offered a ride at one point in that period of time, which he wasn't so certain that he was that ride was going to be the thing for him. He wasn't sure it was going to be well funded enough. This, that, and the other thing. He had a great thing going with the DePompo, and he turned that one down. That ride became, his biggest competitor, and led to that Al Hammond, Mike Rowe thing that went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And in all honesty, historians of Oxford Plains Speedway will tell you that battle between those two men who had so much respect and admiration for each other, really led Oxford through, it's some of its biggest periods of growth. I know that, my father was incredibly loyal to Oxford Plains, and he was incredibly loyal to the promoters and owners of the track. I don't think anybody ever thought more of Dick Baer than my father, not only for the opportunity that he gave him to race at Daytona, but just for the opportunity to race in a fair, competitive market, that Oxford Plains was back then, and still is today. But he had a few sad days along the way. He remarked that one of his saddest days was the day that Tony DePompo said that he really needed to be done racing. And, they had so much success together throughout those years, building cars that were, incredible for their time. Winning 31 races in one car, 31 of 81 races in one car. And then to have your partner in that say, I think we're done. You know, and my father always remarked about, you know, the 80s. And when he started building his own cars and racing their own fleet and struggling and winning and struggling and winning, and how, you know, they sometimes had enough money, most times had nowhere near enough. That was my father in a nutshell, though. I mean, he was as blue collar as they get, driving a log truck during the week or a dump truck or whatever, and then being the king of Oxford Plains on Saturday. In 1965, when he got his first win, he stood before 10,600 people. There was 125 cars that were just trying to qualify for the feature. 36, and he beat them all. You know, and I know that racing was a serious influence in his life, without question. But it was the biggest source of pride. He was a real racer, and I think that's all he ever wanted to be. When I first got wind of this award, I was a bit taken aback, and I was thinking, you know, I know my father's racing history, and but I was thinking, how could such an honor be bestowed upon a guy who was so loyal to Oxford, you know? But I truly understand it. I mean, he was really part of this community, and I know that he considered all of you who he knew a friend. I was also, you know, very pleased to find that he was a Veterans Committee selection, because nothing would make him happier to know that the veterans of this Hall of Fame selected him and wanted him to be part of it. That gives me a tremendous amount of pride for him. It's really a difficult thing, you know, to be the son of a legend. A few of you know about it. But it's difficult for me to think of my father as 80 years old now. You know, he's been removed from our sight for almost 10 years. And when I got wind of this, I was thinking, how would it look when he stands up at that podium and accepts this award in front of so many distinguished, prestigious, dedicated people who love everything that he loved about his life in racing. And I'm not really sure. But my imagination says that he would have gone over to that bar and got a couple of good ones into him and come up here and told you how much he loved and appreciated and how humbled and how honored he was to accept this and be standing before you. One more thing before I go. When I speak of my father's loyalty to Oxford and his loyalty to Dick Bear, it's a little-known fact that my father is buried at Riverside Annex Cemetery in South Paris, Maine. And, you know, as a crow flies, you can almost throw a spitball from his house to the cemetery. He's not buried with his family, his infant son, his parents, in Livermore, Maine. But it happened on the conversation between him and his wife, Dolores, as they were driving by, and she asked him, "Al, where do you want to be buried?" And he said, as they drive by, "Maybe right there. Dick's down there." Thank you so much. We appreciate this. And I'm sorry, I hate to do this. There is one thing that I need to recognize from my stepmother, Dolores Hammond, for being who she is and who she was to my father. Undying support, love, and affection for everything that he ever did, and the woman that's made him the successful man that he was. So this one's for you, Dolores.
Special for me to be able to put this man in the Hall of Fame. World famous Joe Howard. And everybody asks me, why do we call him world famous? How did he get that name? Well, it started at a bar, and most good nicknames start at a bar. And with Pete Newsham, George Savory, and myself, George said, "Do you mind if Joe Howard comes to lunch with us on Saturday?" I said, "Joe Howard? God, I haven't heard that name in 40 years. And so Joe shows up, and I introduce him to Michelle, the bartender. And I said, Michelle, this is Joe Howard. He's a former Westboro Speedway champion. And Joe says, well, I just wasn't a Westboro Speedway champion. I was a 2-time Riverside Park champion out on Tuesday nights. And as a Thompson modified champion in 1979. So Michelle says, well, Joe, you're not Westboro famous, you're world famous. And that's how the name he got embedded with that name. And we remind him that all the time when we talk to him. Joe and I quickly became friends. We had a lot in common that day. We sat down and talked. We had our love for racing, his love for classic cars. His were all Fords. I don't excuse him for that. I learned to adapt myself to that. But we both lost our wives to cancer. And we had deep conversations over the course of the years of what that meant to each one of us and how we keep moving on. And Joe's been a great friend. So in 1970, my father takes me to Westboro Speedway for the first time. And there's this guy in a 58 Ford, of all cars, a 58 Ford. And it's Joe Howard. And he's winning race after race after race. This is when the B division had 40, 50 cars on a Saturday night. They all qualified, and Joe had to keep starting back, farther back, farther back. And every week he was in victory lane. If it wasn't in victory lane, something mechanically happened, but not usually. Joe found out that if he ran a 58 Ford, he could run a 352 Police Interceptor engine, where all the Chevys had to have 283s. So Joe had the bigger engine, and he found that out. And first night out, he parked the car in victory lane and never stopped. This guy's good. 1971, he doesn't really have a ride. Franny Miller has a Grand American Chevelle, and Franny was a good car builder, but terrible driver. He said, Joe, get in my car and see what you can do. Well, at the end of the night, the car was in victory lane. This guy's good. He knows how to drive a race car. In 71, 72, he drove the number 7 Chevelle, won a lot of races at Riverside Park, 2 track championships, and a bunch of races at Westboro. And then in 74, he hooks up with Dave Rosbach and Stretch, and they build the first 1X modified. And they go to Stafford. And Joe says to me, we weren't really good. We weren't really that good. But over the years, Joe continues to drive, sneaks out a win here and then. And then 1979, Stretch builds them the 1X with 180-degree headers with the fiberglass windows and it's just unbelievable. And Joe was unstoppable. At Thompson, he owned Thompson Speedway. Only 2 other drivers that year won at Thompson. That was George Savory and Ronnie Bouchard. At the end of the year, Joe Howard was the track champion. 1980, Joe moves over to Bob Stearns' U2, Universal Auto Salvage U2. And he drives the car and he says to Bob, it's an okay car, but it's heavy. It's a 2x4 chassis. It's just not good. So Bob says, well, I'll tell you what, Howard, if the car's no good, you go out and win with it, and I'll build you a new car. So what's Joe do? The next week, he goes out and wins. Bob, true to his word, builds him a brand new car. 1982, Joe's racing at Stafford and is involved in a really, really bad wreck on the backstretch. He lands on top of Greg Sachs. Joe is knocked unconscious. His helmet is broken in 2 pieces, and he was pretty hurt. He did come back at the end of 82 and try to make a comeback, but Joe said, I just wasn't right. So come along 1983, Joe hangs up his helmet, both pieces, and he's done. So he starts his fledgling trucking business. He has trucks. He has a landfill. He's got a truck repair center that his son Billy runs today, and does very, very well for himself. Puts a collection of antique cars together. No one ever sees Joe Howard at a racetrack ever again. He's vanished. Until George Savory says, can we come to lunch? And boy, I'm sure glad George did. And Joe, I'm sure glad you showed up. So Joe, today you really are world famous. You are going into the New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame. So the quiet man from Millbury, Mass., please welcome Joe Howard.
That better? He said everything I was going to say.
But thank you very much to NEAR, which is April May, Rich Goucher, Mark Alden, and Pete Newsham. They're good people, and they've been very good to me. Plus the Pro 9 Museum, Rich Marcel, okay. He's another good guy. So, when I was like 6 or 7 years old, my father used to bring me to Westboro Speedway every Saturday night, and I fell in love with it. And I had my heroes, Tommy Paget, Reno Tolono, and those are the guys I wanted to race with and beat. So I eventually did, but it was years later. And anyway, it was fun. It was really a lot of fun. I just lived to hear the sound of the engines and smell the fuel, and I think everybody else gets hooked like that. So in 1969, I built an old junk 58 Ford, and not the first time I won with it. I was like, wow, that's great. That was easy. And, well, 70, I built a new one. It wasn't that easy, though. But in any case, we did all right. And Franny Miller was a friend of mine. He did a good job on the motor of the car. And so the following year, I drove his number 7 Grand American car, and we did all right with that also. So then we went to, a couple of years later, I went to Modifieds and hooked up with Stretch, Dave Rossback, and Tommy Gavin. And in any case, it was Vic Kangas. And then I think it was 1980, I hooked up with Bob Stern, the U2. A very fast car. Very nice car. I mean, quality to top to the bottom. And he's a good guy also. He had Tommy Gavin and Hop Harrington, which Hop Harrington was my hero anyway. So in any case, we built the car, and he built the car, and we went out and instantly flew with the car and did very, very well with it. And I want to thank everybody who supported me and helped me out from the beginning to the end. And I did get hurt. I wrecked this car, demolished this car in 1982 or 83 or something like that. And I wasn't right for years after that. My head was really messed up. I think I'm okay today. Am I? But, would I do it again? Absolutely. I loved it. Every bone in my body got broken, but I still feel it today. But I think a lot of us ended up like that. But anyway, thank you very much.
No, bring it up.
This way?
Okay. And at this time, I'd like to welcome back our president, April May Preston Elms, as she will present the Charlie Stebbins Award.
We're seeing a lot of Mark up here today. I don't know why. I didn't plan that very well, did I? The Charlie Stebbins Award is given this year to Mark Alden. Mark has been a member of NEAR for close to 20 years. During that time, he's been an active member of the car shows, competing and displaying his cars, and is now organizing special events that are part of the car and mobile museum schedules. He's been a long-standing member of the selection committee, and when the former chair had to step down for personal reasons, he quickly stepped up to the plate to make sure that the annual selections for the Hall of Fame continued. Mind you, it wasn't without some hardship, as at the time he said he was dying of the flu and he didn't think he was going to make it. So he called up Pete Newsham and said, I will co-chair with you, but you have to drive this one because I'm just too sick. Luckily for us all, Mark quickly recovered and has gone on to co-chair the selection committee with Pete for several years now. He truly cares about the history of auto racing in New England and is willing to go the extra mile to make sure that NEAR continues to preserve its heritage. He may not be the best computer guy, but he is always willing and looking to improve the process of it to ensure the best candidates are successfully chosen each year. We actually have a whiteboard. I was Vanna, and I had to write your names on a board and check off how many. I'm like, can't I do this on the computer? But no, we do the whiteboard. As we look down the list of who was to receive this award, it was easy to see that Mark needed to be our next recipient. From the board of directors, congratulations, Mark. You deserve it.
called. I was laying in bed dying of the flu when Bruce Cohen called me and said he was stepping down immediately. And it was 2 weeks before our May meeting. And I says, well, Bruce, I wish you'd reconsider. I really need you on. I really need you now because I'm dying. I'm going to die. And so I called Pete, and Pete says, don't worry about it. We'll go to JP's, have some beer and chicken wings. We'll figure it out. And that's just exactly what we did after I got better. Pete wouldn't come near me for a week. So it's about the people. I've been blessed to work with NEAR under all the past presidents. They've all been great. They stepped forward. Ronnie St. Germain and Tommy Gavin, who, when I have this weird idea to restore an old race car to keep the history alive, they're right there to help me, and I appreciate it. But most important, my co-chair, Pete Newsham, he went and got married last week. And, you know, the standard joke is when you get married, it's a 3-ring circus. Comes the engagement ring, the wedding ring, and then the suffering. So Wednesday I called Pete to talk about the Hall of Fame. He's at the Yankee Candle Factory. How bad is that? You know, I go, Pete, I'm losing you, buddy. So, Pete, come on up here. We're going to set this, I got an award for you. You know, I know you love candles. So, Pete, here you go.
Thank you, sir.
Without Pete, we can't put this together. Pete and I, we work hard, and Pete has, you know, really done a great job to help me through this, and I appreciate the award. Thank you.
Pete, I'm just going to say my longtime girlfriend, Sharon Auger, understands, because she gets told in April, you do realize that this is the last Saturday night date, unless there is rain, until November. Well, this year, November. Normally it's October. So, and I would like to bring Pete up now, as he will present the Danny Pardee Memorial Award.
Wow, that's a tough act to follow. Thank you, Mark. Very well-deserved honor for the Charlie Stebbins Award. Danny Pardee. Danny Pardee, for those who remember, Danny was a very large figure in auto racing, no pun intended. He was very dedicated to auto racing in general. He served as race director at a couple of different speedways. And most importantly, this award is given out every year to the person who shows dedication to this, the Hall of Fame. Danny Pardee started off with Al Feeney in orchestrating a lot of the banquets we used to have at the La Renaissance in East Windsor, Connecticut. He was there at every moment, not only dedicated to the Hall of Fame, but to NEAR in general. He was a very valued member of the Hall of Fame, very valued member of NEAR. Now, you can all turn into your programs and look at page 16. I'm not going to rehash what this woman has accomplished with NEAR, but I can tell you that she is given this club a breath of fresh air. Along with Rich Goucher, this team has put together this Hall of Fame. The bar just keeps going up, which it should, because each individual that goes into the Hall of Fame, you are so important to us, and this is our way of showing you thanks. So this is our way of showing someone who's dedicated to the Hall of Fame to give this year's Danny Pardee Award for dedication to the Hall of Fame to April May Preston Elms.
Good. Good, because I was crying. Beautiful. I'm not going to say anything. My husband was inducted in 2000. What year is it? I can't see from here. 16 or 18 anyway. And he said, I wish we could do more for the organization. And then they needed a treasurer. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And here we are 4 years later. This is an amazing group of people. I'm so honored and really privileged. I feel just blessed to be here. So thank you very much.
Okay, you're not done.
I'm not done. Come on.
And we have a parting gift. April May.
I get a jacket? I get a jacket.
She got her own jacket.
A jacket. Yay.
Come on down here. We'll take a picture.
Okay.
Now it's time to begin our Hall of Fame ceremony inductees. And first, we'll have Rich Goucher come up as he will be presenting for John and inducting Mr. John Steiger, who those of you, well, I'm old enough to remember his $sign cars over at the Plainville Stadium.
Okay, hi guys, I'm the Vice President of NEAR, and I'm filling in for Bones Borse here. That's a tough job to do, because half the people in this room wanted to sit next to him if he was coming. So Bones is under contract to get his next publication out, and he just couldn't take the time away from his work to do so. But he was nice enough to send along his speech that he would have done for John Steiger, because only Bones could do him right. The late John Steiger played a key role in modified history as one of the two men behind the legendary Eastern Bandits. One Saturday in 1961, aboard Steiger's $sign coupe, Ed Flemke won a 100-lapper at Long Island's Islip Speedway. The next day in Old Bridge, New Jersey, Eddie and the $sign won once again. Present for both races was Nelson Royal, promoter of the Southside Speedway in Richmond, Virginia. Impressed with Flemke's display, Royal offered him a deal to compete at his track. Flemke accepted. He and Steiger won almost immediately and turned their southern raids into an almost weekly thing. Thus began a 3-year stretch of endless highways, all-night diners, and checkered flags. And it's worth pointing out that if all of this was possible only because Flemke had a car owner, John Steiger, who was as restless and adventurous as Eddie was himself. Southern sports writers dubbed Flemke the Yankee Bandit, and later the Eastern Bandit. Since fellow Connecticut racer Denny Zimmerman always traveled and raced alongside Flemke, the press simply pluralized the name into the Eastern Bandits. Those two, along with frequent companions Renee Charlian and Red Foot, went into folklore as all Eastern Bandits. Flemke and Steiger would often leave Connecticut on Wednesday and race that night at Islip on Long Island, Thursday at Fort Dix Speedway in New Jersey, Friday at Southside Speedway in Richmond, Saturday at Old Dominion Speedway in Manassas, Virginia, and Sunday afternoon at Marlboro, Maryland. Then they went to Sunday night at Old Bridge. After a day or two at home in Connecticut, they'd once again hit the road. If one of the above-mentioned tracks rained out, John and Eddie might hustle to Langley Field, South Boston Speedway, or Fredericksburg Speedway, all in Virginia, or perhaps Dog Track Speedway, a dirt oval in Moyock, North Carolina. In 1961, they were the winningest modified team at Southside and also had multiple scores at Fredericksburg and Old Dominion. But they really came alive in 1962, winning 17 features at Old Dominion alone, including 11 in a row. There were track titles at Old Bridge in 1961 and Southside in 1962, all because of John Steiger and his cars. In 1963, Flemke and Steiger continued to win in Dixieland, but also did well on their trips down there and back. At Fort Dix, they won 7 Thursday features and a track championship. At Old Bridge, their Sunday night wins included a 100-lapper. Their record also included 2 huge victories in the Tobacco Bowl at Bowman Gray Stadium in North Carolina, just over a year apart. One on December 30th, 61, and the other on January 1st, 63. The stadium was a tough little place in the Bandit years. Its track champs were Glenn Wood, Perk Brown, and Billy Hensley. Flemke and Steiger invaded twice for the Tobacco Bowl and won both times. Occasionally, owing to weather forecasts or track schedules, Steiger and Flemke would stick closer to home. In the same time frame, they won at Norwood Arena outside Boston, Empire Speedway and Utica Rome Speedway in New York, and West Hampton Speedway on Long Island. Their hectic life produced stories that amused Steigers years and years later. One involved getting stopped on a weekly basis on the New Jersey Turnpike, where police fiercely enforced a law prohibiting any trailer wider than 8 feet 6 inches. Steiger said we were definitely wider than that. But in those days, you could get out of your car and talk to the cop while he checked you out. When he went to measure the trailer, either Eddie or I would offer to hold one end of the tape. While the cop was walking across the trailer to the other side, we'd cheat the tape, move it a little, and we were on our way. Time after time, their trickery saved them from costly tickets. But the fun and games ended one night when Steiger got pulled over yet again. John recalled, Eddie and I shrugged and got out, ready to do our little trick with the tape measure. Only then did Steiger and Flemke notice that this time there were 2 cops. Each of the troopers grabbed an end of the tape, and there was nothing they could do. Said Steiger, we were busted. The Eastern Bandit saga ended at the close of 1963, largely because of NASCAR's growing NASCAR footprint. In 1964, Steiger wore out the Massachusetts Turnpike and the New York Thruway. He wrenched Flemke to 5 Saturday night wins at Norwood, and on Sundays, the dollar sign carried Flemke to 11 victories, including 5 in a row at Utica Rome. It was also at Utica Rome that Flemke and the Steiger Coupe swept both 200-lap halves of the 1964 New Yorker 400. In the late 60s, Steiger cut back a bit, running on a limited basis with drivers like Fats Caruso and Smokey Boutwell. But in the mid-70s, with New England in the heat of its small block modified craze, John was running back up to full speed. He campaigned a blue number 7 Pinto and also built and wrenched the earliest Manchester sand and gravel number 10 Pintos. In 74, Flemke and the 7 won at Thompson, while the 10 won 100 lappers with Flemke at Seekonk and Plainville, and a special event victory at Thompson with Ron Bouchard. In 1975, the Manchester Sand and Gravel number 10 won at Stafford with Flemke, while the Steiger 7 and Flemke won Waterford's Blast Off 100, a 100-lap Plainville event, and 3 Thompson features. Flemke led the point standings at Thompson until that August, when injuries suffered in a crash elsewhere derailed his season. With Eddie sidelined, Bug Stevens won at Thompson in the Steiger 7. Quiet and soft-spoken, Steiger preferred to let his race cars and his mechanical brilliance speak for him. Today, we honor his memory with a round of applause as we usher John Steiger into the New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame. Accepting the award for her brother John is Marion Howard.
Hi, my name's Marion Howard, and of course Johnny's sister, and I'm nervous. Don't talk in front of a lot of people a lot of the time, so bear with me. But I'd like to thank you to the gentleman who wrote that. Thought that was very nice to say all of those things about my brother. My brother was a very quiet person, said very little. So in his honor, I'm going to say very little. I know if Johnny was here, he would like to thank each and every one of you for supporting him. I should call him John because you more and less knew him as John and not as Johnny. Racing was extremely important to him. I know when I was still at home and Johnny wasn't there, well, where is Johnny? He's off at the races. I know that if he was here, he would like to say thank you to each and every one of you for supporting him and probably shake your hand. So in his presence and non-presence, I am going to say thank you very much for supporting him, and we really appreciate such a special, very important honor. Thank you.
Next up, I would like to bring up Carl Fredrickson as he will present for Mr. Ted Marsh.
Hi there, my name is Carl Fredrickson. and I'm the publisher of Speedway Illustrated magazine. And today I have the privilege of welcoming Ted Marsh into the Near Hall of Fame. As a journalist, it's my job to get the story right. And the best way to do so is in person. So I called Ted and asked if I could take him to dinner. Happily, he agreed, and I brought my notebook. I should have brought 2 notebooks. Fascinating story, this man we call Ted Marsh, which actually should be pointed out, that isn't his name. You see, if you do media, journalism right, you have to start with the basics. So I said, okay, so it's Ted, T-E-D, Marsh, M-A-R-S-H. He said, yep, but that's not my name. He said, my name is Edward. My mother wanted me to be named Ted after a favorite uncle of hers. And she couldn't, so she just called him Ted anyway. And then he said, my father called me George. I'm trying to process all this, and he says, my high school diploma says Theodore. I'm going to move on, because otherwise I'll slip into one of those old, you can call me Ray, or you can call me Jay, but you doesn't have to call me Johnson routines. If you're under 55, ask your grandparents. I don't know what I'm talking about. Ted joined the Army in 58. His love for all things mechanical started to blossom into what would become a career as an engineer, eventually working for the Navy, primarily on submarines. And if you know something about engineers, they never leave well enough alone. For instance, Ted's MG was a 1950 TD model. You know the one. It's got the beautifully rolled fenders and the very small, tiny trunk. Right-hand drive, tiny 2-seater. And that trunk space, by the way, would be very important when he married the lovely Linda in 1962. Before I go any further, she's here today. Ted and Linda, the love of each other's lives. Married 61 years. And I think that deserves a round of applause. It must have been a shaky start, though, because young Ted, the engineer, provided quite the pain in her backside right out of the gate. You see, he had installed a 1950s Ford rear-end housing in that MG. And always a matter of preparedness, he carried a spare axle. And the only place it fit was behind Linda's seat. So the honeymooners sped off from their Connecticut home to Los Angeles in the little car, carrying a single suitcase and 3 axles. Imagine Linda's 3,000-mile journey with every bump, dip, and pothole providing a stern reminder of just who she married. Just outside Flagstaff, Arizona, Linda's the one who noticed that the oil pressure was dropping in the car. So Ted found a gas station that was attached to a Chevrolet dealership, and he persuaded the general manager to come out and take a look at his car. The general manager came out and he said, son, you got your alphabet all mixed up. That there's an MG and this here's GM. And that's when Ted wandered over, lifted the hood, and revealed that he had snuck a small block Chevrolet engine in that MG too. The manager let Ted have a bay and fix his car. It took a week. He said altogether the honeymoon lasted 6 weeks, but I think they're still on it. And that axle, well, it came in handy on a deserted Ohio highway on their way home. But like so many others, Ted's enthusiasm for engineering drew him to the racetrack. He marveled at the flimky front end. Equally legendary chassis builder Maynard Troyer studied Marsh's designs. Marsh built a stock car like that MG that was right-hand drive so he could put more weight on the left. In running that car in 1970, he and crew member Guy Barger took their regular spot on the truck's bed to watch the first of 25 lap features. And at the conclusion, they grabbed a couple of hot dogs from the concession stand, and they ate in what we call, racer fine dining, huddled over a trash can. That's when the commotion broke out, because their driver, Billy Harmon, was waiting for them in Victory Lane. It was Ted's first victory as a car owner. Many drivers turned Marsh's wheels. They include Ken Bouchard, Ted Christopher, Steve Park, Andy Santerre, Ryan Priest, and Ricky Fuller, who earned the lone championship in 1985 at Waterford. Marsh's motivation, though, wasn't championships, and while he had many wins, it wasn't those either. He loved to see his car move through the field. He saw it as his job to provide a car capable of doing so to a driver who was equally capable of doing so. He told me, I never wanted a driver who worked on the car because I'd be afraid of tearing it up. I like aggression, so I never minded if it got wrecked, unless it was deliberate. Wait a minute, did you just tell me you had Ted Christopher driving for you? He said, yeah, TC would get in trouble with me for hitting other cars for no reason. But the idea was having an opportunity to build something that he created and having fun at the racetrack. And those drivers who I spoke with echoed those words. Steve Park said, I thoroughly enjoyed driving for him. I can't think of a better person to go in the Near Hall of Fame. Ted represented the Northeast in the best way possible. He always made sure we were competitive, having fun, and enjoying ourselves. The way he treats his crew and drivers are first class. Another driver, Ryan Priest, told me he was the level-headed car owner with the quiet confidence who never got rattled. He carried the biggest smile and the biggest margarita I've ever seen. Such a reputation netted quite a few resumes for Ted Marsh, too. And during dinner, he casually mentioned something to me that I found remarkable. He said, I never threw a resume away. How could I? That's a person's whole life on that piece of paper. The gravity of such words caused our table to grow quiet and maybe a bit reflective, because he spoke about the only race he was determined to win. He and Andy Santerre agreed to run the September 2000 Busch North race at New Hampshire. The Santerres, Andy and Sue, had a friend, Beth Wright, who was bravely fighting cancer, and they wanted to honor her. Sue Santerre organized a fundraiser around the car and placed an image of this brave woman on the hood. Her close family and friends gathered at the racetrack in the team's pit area before the big race. Some of them didn't know that she had already passed away just 2 days before. I told Andy, we have to win this race. We just have to. And we did. And in true Ted Marsh fashion, he said, but it was all Andy, of course. And he said, the rewards in racing are seeing your car go and the friendships made along the way. You got a room for him here, Ted, or whatever your name is. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Marsh.
You made a lot of that up, didn't you?
Yeah, everywhere.
Thank you very much. Today's a great day for me. Really honored. Ricky, how are you? Good to see you. My whole family's here. All my kids, my wife, all my grandkids are here. And a lot of my past employees are here. They're all sitting over in the back over there, close to the bar, naturally. And even some of my other old drivers are here. Kenny B, Ricky Fuller. No Dickie Casso, though. And no Jerry Dostie. Unfortunately, I lost him. But anyway, I started in the mid-'60s. A kid down the street from me started building a car in the middle of winter with no garage, outside. And I would drive by and see this kid, and it's unbelievable. How could he do this? But he did it. And he got the car done for Waterford. And he ran it as a bomber. And I remember going over there and trying to help him. But I had Linda with me, and we weren't allowed to go in the pits with a lady. So we had a meeting at the fence after practice, after the heat races and so forth. And I tried to give him advice as best I could from just watching the car. But anyway, it was a lot of fun in those days. And I can remember at Waterford in the bomber days, there was 2 idols there that I had, Art Berry and Bob Gabarino. Those 2 guys were beautiful cars, the best. And I used to marvel at their cars and the way they ran their businesses. So it's amazing. It's been a long ride. But along about mid-'90, I was walking through the Waterford pits. I wasn't running the modified because Stafford threw us out in '85, or the end of '85. they wanted all SKs or something, so we left and just ran special shows. But I was walking through the pit area, and Teddy Christopher yelled at me. And he says, "Hey," he says, "I bought a Bush car. I want you to look at it." Okay, bring it to my shop. So he did, and it was something, a piece of work. 2x2 frame, I mean, really illegal car. But we converted it and made it a legal Bush North car, and it's back in the V6 days. So I don't know if we ever finished a race with the thing. The motors would blow up almost every time. It was terrible. But anyway, around about 96, one of my guys, one of my first full-time employees is here, helped me build a 96 car for TC, and we ran it at New Hampshire and won with it. That's Roger Tryon sitting right down here. Anyway, it was from there on, it was more races, and finally I had a marketing guy that worked with me named Brad Wheeler, who was another engineer from the Navy. But this guy thought outside the box on everything. I've never seen anything like it. So we decided we'd go to Wheeling and see if we could round up some money to help us. At the time, we had Less Care Kitchens sponsoring Teddy, and they were terrible to deal with. They were really tough. So anyway, really tough. We went to Wheeling and walked in the CEO's office and sat down, and he never looked up. He said, "If you guys are here for money, you've come to the wrong place." And I'm ready to say, "Thank you, John," and get up and leave. Now, Brad, he says, "We're not here for money. We're here to borrow your airplane." John put his pen down. He said, "What?" He said, "Yeah." He says, "We've got these executives that run this kitchen company, and they don't like to drive long distances, and they don't want to drive to Watkins Glen. So we wondered if we could talk you into flying the people up there for us." And John liked things like that, so he agreed to it. So we put his name on the car, and along with Less Care Kitchens. And just before we were to leave up there, Brad called me up. He had another idea. He said the in-car camera folks had called him, and they have an in-car camera available for that race for $7,500. Would we be willing to do it? So I said to Brad, I said, "Well, you call Less Care and see if they'll split it, and we'll try Wheeling and see if they'll take the other half." So we did that. And the other in-car camera was, I think, Brian Wall. Is that right? Brian Wall? He had an in-car camera, and unfortunately, he blew up on the first lap, so he was out. But Teddy started third. This is at Watkins Glen. And he went to shift from second to third, and the transmission locked up between the two gears. So he went from third to 28th or 29th before he finally got it straightened out and got going again. And away he went, and the whole TV show was Teddy Christopher in the car and watching him saw his way through that field, and we won the race. But the best part was there was a yellow, midway through the race, and Benny Parsons was the commentator, and he got on the radio talking to Teddy, and he says, "So Teddy, how are things going?" Teddy says, "They got the camera right on him." And Teddy says, "I'm a little busy right now, I can't talk." And he's just sitting there. Typical TC. He just didn't want to talk to him. So anyway, we did that and ran some Bush races, and finally got a Bush South car with Steve Park driving it. And when we went to go down south with that, Steve was already driving for Dale Earnhardt. He was driving the #1 Pennzoil car. So when he went to Dale to say he wanted to run a Bush car on Saturday, he told him what car, and Dale said, "They ain't going to use that number, are they?" We had the 13 on the car. So Dale said, "They can use my number. Have them use my number." So I called NASCAR, and I said, Dale's number for the Bush Series was 31. So I said, we'd like to get 31. Dale said we could have it. Of course, NASCAR says, "They don't make those decisions. Dale doesn't make those decisions." Okay. I called Steve back, and I said, NASCAR called and said, "Sorry, Dale doesn't make those decisions." He said, "Oh, okay." He went into Dale. Half hour later, I got a phone call from NASCAR. "You got the 31. But anyway, we ran that until Steve got really hurt badly at Darlington. Had a rain delay, and during the rain delay, he got out of the car, used the facilities, and then when he got back in the car, he never latched the steering wheel. And riding around under the yellow, making sure the track was dry, was no problem. I mean, he wasn't scuffing tires or doing anything, so the steering wheel stayed on. But as soon as they gave the 1 to go sign, they really started honking on the steering wheel to get the tires cleaned off. Here comes A.J. Foyt's son from the back. They used to line up single file in those days, and the lap down cars came up on the inside. And that's the only way you get your lap back. They didn't have a lucky dog deal. But Steve was just cranking on the wheel coming off too when the steering wheel came off, and he got T-boned by Larry Foyt. And Steve was in severe condition, bad concussion. And we were worried for a while. I mean, I was in the hospital with him. It was touch and go, really touch and go. But he came back, and he actually came back and tried to drive again for us in 06. So that was basically 5 years later. And he tried, but he still wasn't 100%. And he did finally come back and race some, but it's, unfortunately, I think we ruined his career. But, that's racing is like that, does that kind of thing. But anyway, along about the same time, Mr. Whelan, Sonny Whelan, who owns Whelan, I had never even met him in my life. And he lived in the next town from me his whole life. But we had a media day, the Busch North Series had a media day at Lime Rock, and Teddy Christopher was driving for us. And Whalen was already sponsoring us with the airplane deal. And so Brad called Sonny Whelan, this marketing guy of mine, called Sonny Whelan and said, how about coming up to meet the team? So I said, oh, yeah. So he came up. He's a really nice guy. So he came up, met all of us, and went through the truck, met Teddy, and then it was starting to say goodbye. And then they announced that the media guys were all getting rides with professionals down on the grid. So we sent Sonny down there, and they put him in a Viper with a pro driver, and they told him, if you like it, keep your thumbs up. If you want to come in, put your thumbs down. He sat there the entire time with his thumbs up, never put him down. So they ran about 10 laps with him, and the guy went as hard as he could. And Sonny left there, and within 6 months, he owned a Viper, brand new one. And a few months later, I heard he was running gymkhanas in parking lots and that kind of thing. So I wasn't too worried. But then I heard he was going to Mid-Ohio. And when I heard that, I got worried. I mean, this thing has no roll cage, no nothing. So I finally called him myself. And I said, Sonny, look, if you're going to race a car, why don't you find an older Viper that's been built, buy it, and we'll redo it for you. So that's what he did. And that Sonny started racing. That was 2001 or so. And he raced right up until Parkinson's got the best of him. And he's still involved in racing, as everybody knows, in just about every division there is. But that's my story. And I kind of hang with Sonny now. We still do some road race stuff when we can, when people have stuff they want us to do. But other than that, I see Ricky every now and then down south. First time I've seen him up north in a long time. Anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate it very much.
And now I'd like to welcome to the stage the co-creator, co-host, and art director of Uncommon Deeds Motorsports podcast and the Crunch Bunch podcast, Mr. Justin St. Louis, as he will present Mike Ordway.
How are we doing, everybody? 5 Vermonters in the room. That's awesome. I love it. So last year at this ceremony, I was asked to induct the great dirt modified driver, Kenny Tremont. And I was pretty comfortable in that role. I've known Ken for a lot of years and seen him race and win for a long time. But I described last year how, as a kid, I was never really exposed to dirt racing. And as a school kid and a teenager, the only way to follow Kenny Tremont at the time was in the papers or in the infancy of short track coverage on the internet, which was basically non-existent. Well, the same goes with me for super modifieds, but to the nth degree. I knew they went awful fast, and a few of them had that little squatty wing thing, and that was about it. I maybe saw them race once at Lee at the most. So other than that, it was Racerama or reading the weekly rags. So to recap here, Near has entrusted me to present people that I don't know anything about. Nothing about modifieds on dirt, but I knew the name Kenny Tremont. Even less about super modifieds on asphalt, but I have heard of 2 names in super modified racing, Bentley Warren and Mike Ordway. But there's the problem. The only Mike Ordway that I had ever heard of was the street stock guy from the 90s on the dirt at Bear Ridge. So this really doesn't work out very well. I'm kidding. I'd never heard of that guy either. I did know this particular Mike Ordway. How could you not, right? He was one of the top guys in the supers for decades. And I knew that I wanted to do right by him today, even though we hadn't met, and I really don't believe I've ever seen you race. But I dove into the archives, and for a stats guy like me, that was therapy. I love stats. I love research. I love the history of this sport. And I was blown away at what I learned. Many of you in this room lived these moments. You saw this happen. But what a thrill it was for me to discover that on his way to winning a pair of ISMA championships in the 90s, he was one of the very few who won at Volusia, Florida. And there were not many opportunities for asphalt racers to drive at Volusia, let alone win. He won at Kalamazoo, Michigan, an insanely cool place that the entirety of American motorsports is aware of. He won in the Canadian Maritimes at Petty Raceway, New Brunswick, and at Canada's Crown Jewel at Cayuga. He won at Jennerstown, PA. He won at the lost and lamented Flemington Square in New Jersey. He won at the historic Orange County Speedway in Rougemont, North Carolina. And that was just some of the easy stuff for me to find, and it really made my historian ears perk up. But then there's the big stuff. He was the track champion at Star Speedway right in his backyard when Star was absolutely white hot. That was in 1984. I was just a year old at that time. That was back when I was bald. He was a winner at Sandusky, Ohio in 2012. I was bald then again, too, by the way. And I'm joking about that, but if that doesn't illustrate the longevity of a driver's career, 1984, a champion, 2012, winning one of the biggest races in the country. If that doesn't illustrate his longevity, I don't know what will. And then there's everything else in between. Oktoberfest at Lee, the World Series at Thompson, twice. The Star Classic, a sweep of the High Miler at Sandusky. He drove, and he drove well for legends like Clyde Booth and Paul Dunnigan, and I did even know those names. And actually, as a quick aside, while I was doing my research for this, I came across an obituary for Paul Dunnigan, and I'm not sure who proofread it, or maybe it was intentional, but it read like this, and I quote, "After a long struggle with an undefeatable foe, Lowell, Massachusetts, super-modified car owner Paul Dunnigan passed away on Monday. I suppose if you've never lived in Lowell or been through there, you won't get the joke, but those of you who do, get it. So anyway, back to Mike Ordway. There's the promised land for super-modifieds, Oswego. He was a champion at the legendary Steel Palace in 1991, defeating Eddie Bellinger, Joe Gosick, Pat Abel, Bentley Warren. I've heard of those guys. Those guys are legends. That's enough to hang your hat on right there, but he also finished second in points in 88 and 92. He put together an incredible 30 wins at Oswego over a 16-year period, and that still ranks him 10th on the all-time list at the track. Consider now that Oswego is coming up on 75 years, and he is top 10 all-time. He won this Mr. Super Modified event 6 times, and the Jimmy Champagne Memorial Race twice, and in 2003, the granddaddy of them all, the Classic. What else is there to say? It's a proud day for Super Modified fans and a moment that has been beyond earned for one of their greatest drivers. I have a feeling that we'll probably be back here in another 20 or 30 years honoring the next generation into the Near Hall of Fame as well. But for now, it's my honor and my privilege to induct Mike Ordway into the New England Auto Racing Hall of Fame.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. And he did his homework, some of it. That's why I'm here? Yeah. I'm not one known as a man of few words. So I did have a lot of great car owners, and one of them is here tonight. And I'm looking right at him, Red McDonald. Got to drive for Red back in, I don't know, 86, 87 maybe, Red? Thank you for that. Ricky Reduker, thank you for all the sponsorship help. We had a lot of good sponsors. AutoZone, Auto Palace, Auto Color. Remember them all. Huh? Every color, yes. Had a lot of good races over the years. Had a lot of bad ones. But that's the way racing goes, right? You win some, you lose some. Can't win them all. But I went to the racetrack to try to win them all. And I guess I won my share. So I'd like to thank a few people. I'd like to thank my wife for putting up with this for 30-something plus years of driving. We're still going to the racetrack with our son. And I'd like to thank some of my crew guys, Ed Page, Scott LeClaire, Jimmy Curtis. Bob Vinces was my first crew chief I had. I can't remember too many more. But I'd just like to say thank you, everybody here, and thanks for the committee. Thank you for voting me in. Thank you.
Riley Lindblad built race cars that have won championships up and down the East Coast, from pro stocks to midgets, from modifieds to super modifieds. Riley set the bar when it came to race car fabrication. His Badger revolutionized midget racing in the 1970s and early 60s, and Riley raced a front-engined slingshot dragster that he designed. Lindblad's Badgers won championships with Butch Walsh in 73, Johnny Mann 74, Dave Humphreys in 1978, and multiple championships with Drew Fenoro. Now it's my honor, as he will introduce Mr. Mike Whedon, to bring up to the stage Riley Lindblad.
Where are you, Mike? Mike and I ran into one another at Stafford during the Sizzler, and I didn't make the show, and he was walking around after a blown motor at New Smyrna. So I walked up to him and I said, "You got your helmet, Mike?" And he goes, "Yep." I said, "You want to drive the non-qualifiers?" And he says, "Yep." So that was 1980, and we got together, and we raced that year. And Mike was a rookie, and I was a dumb car owner. But Mike taught me a lot in that year. We raced weekly at Thompson, and we finished fourth in points. And you say, big deal, fourth. But Jerry Cook was third, Ronnie Bouchard was second, and Richie was the winner. And Mike ran wheel to wheel with those guys all year and did a hell of a job. And of course, Mike went on to great things in the Bush North, Pro Stock, and chassis building. He was taking a lot of my business away, by the way. But he had great character. He was very polite, never hurt equipment, and did a hell of a job for a lot of good people. And I think that's why I nominated him a couple of years ago for this Hall of Fame. And I'm happy to say, Mike Whedon, congratulations. You're the latest Hall of Fame member. Now you got to talk.
Thank you, Rolly.
Yeah, great to know you, buddy.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank April May, Preston Elms, Paul Massey, and Nicholas Tito for making this possible. I would also like to express my gratitude for all those who voted for me and congratulate the other inductees. When I was young, I used to sell ice cream in the stands at Pines and Hudson Speedways. Well, I got hooked. I thought racing was the neatest thing in the world. So I had to race. When I was young, well, I got a little lost here. Here we go. I knew I had to race, but getting my first race car wasn't easy. I was only 14 years old and still in trade school. When I got out of trade school, I would hitchhike 15 miles to a junkyard to work all weekend. The owner would feed me, let me sleep on his living room floor, give me a ride home come Sunday night, and hand me a $5 bill. I did this all winter with the understanding that come springtime, I could have any car, motor, parts I needed to build my first race car. Of course, I picked out a nice 55 Chevy, and I was on my way. I picked up some valuable help early on from Bob Bixby, my trade school buddies Phil Burrill and Dave Simard. In '74, I got a few wins at Star and Hudson Speedway, Larry Whitman's Modified, along with a couple of top 3 finishes in open mod shows at Westboro Speedway behind a red-hot George Summers. We decided to build a new race car for the '75 season at Seekonk and Westboro Speedways. Well, the good finishes were hard to come by. We later learned that that car was about 400 pounds too heavy. In '77, I returned to Westboro with help from longtime Ollie Silver associate John Halloran and a much lighter car, and we won the Westboro Modified Championship. In '78, Bob Ramstrom gave me a great opportunity to race his Modified, along with help from Dickie Byron and his son Richard. Then came another big break in 1980. Rolly Lindblad asked me to drive his car, his Modified. To this day, it's the fastest Modified I ever drove. One day, after shutting down the night before, concerned about motor problems, Rolly wanted to make sure I was getting everything out of the car. So he said to me, "Kid, if you want to drive this race car, you drive it as hard as you can till the wheels fall off, the motor blows up, or you crash. And if the motor's going to blow it up because it's no damn good anyhow." We got along pretty good after that. The success with Rolly opened the door for more opportunities in other good cars. Ross Nichioski's 34 Modified, George Church's NASCAR North in '85, and in '86 I teamed up with Buddy DeRocha and Harry Franson to run the Super Modified. Then again with Buddy and Harry in '87, but this time in the Busch Grand National North car. In '88, I teamed up with Dennis Gagliotti, Norm Wren, and Ralph Scavatti to run Pro Stocks. We ended up winning the Star and Lee Pro Stock Championships, along with a Triple Crown Series at Oxford a little later on. We did this with the help of Brian Banker, Craig Carter, Steve Butnick, and our longtime scorer, Gail Trask. Then we set our sights on the Busch Grand National North Series in the '90s. Somewhere along the line, Dennis got this notion that I drove better when I was mad. So just before the feature, he would say or do something just to tick me off. In '93, I teamed up with Bob Nolette, Jim St. Jean, with motors from Nat Chevatone, and together we ran the Actor and the Pro Stocks. In '95, with the help of a great crew, which included Bob's brother Jimmy Nolette and Jimmy Bonnier, we won Pro Stock championships at Star, Lee, and Thompson with the one car we had. One weekend, we had to qualify for the Oxford 250 and then beeline it to Star Speedway for the evening show there. Well, after qualifying, I didn't bother to change out of my fire suit. I took off down Route 26 with my crew, only to get stopped for speeding. The police officer, noticing I was wearing a fire suit, walked up to the car with his hand on his gun. And he looks in the window. He says, "Are you for real?" Well, good thing he had a good sense of humor. He ended up letting us off with a warning. But for more than 30 years, racing was my passion, and I'm forever grateful to all those I've mentioned. And last, I wish to share with you the best advice I ever got in racing. It came from my daughter, Katie, when she was about 5 or 6 years old. One night, after finishing a close second to someone, Katie, bless her little heart, comes up to me and she said, "You know, Daddy, if you passed that guy, you would have won." Thank you very much, everybody.
I don't know if this next gentleman really needs a big. As a matter of fact, our next two, that are going to be inducting drivers into the Hall of Fame need a big induction. But I was at a race that he was sponsor of. I get to work at it every spring when Stafford opens the Spring Sizzler. I'd like to welcome to the podium Dr. Dick Bergen, who fell in love with auto racing when he first, at 8, Dick, I might have been a little younger when my parents brought me to Riverside. But welcome to the podium, Dr. Dick Bergen.
Gee, it's so nice to be with you this afternoon. April, May, I think this is the best executed, most fun, most professional near Hall of Fame dinner I have ever been to. Thank you. Brad Layton won Busch North race after Busch North race after Busch North race, especially at New Hampshire International Speedway and the road courses. Compared to those he beat, out of the car, Layton was quiet, kept to himself. His rivalry with Dave Dion and Dave's brothers was anything but quiet, and it sold plenty of tickets to the races in which those two guys knocked each other around. They wrecked each other just for the hell of it. And that was okay, because Brad knew how to drive, how to make it go fast, how to get to the finish of the race with a checkered flag waved, even with bent fenders. He told me he was humbled by the fact that he was chosen for this award he was about to receive. Said he was just a backyard racer from New Hampshire. Here's his career stats. They are not at all the stuff of a backyard fellow from Cow Hampshire. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a New England Auto Racing Hall of Fame level record of winning. In his career as a Busch North driver, Brad Layton won 24 times and earned the championships in 1999 and 2000. He won more Busch North races than any other driver at the series' biggest and most important track, New Hampshire International Speedway. Most years, there were 2 races there. He won both of them on 3 separate occasions, in 1996, 1999, and 2002. He won half of those New Hampshire Speedway races in 2000, 2001, and 2003. He won the 1995 ACT Championship. He won a Beach Ridge Speedway Championship in 1990. When Bob Baer owned New Hampshire Speedway, he crowned annual champions of the local divisions that ran for him. Layton won 4 of those championships, 1998, 2000, 2001, and 2002. Baer respected guys like Layton, the local boys that came to the big track and got it done. And Bob had a Christmas time party every year where the champions were given a nice check and a nice trophy. And Brad brought those home. He won features at 19 different racetracks from Canada to Florida. And the list reflects Brad Layton's versatility. New Hampshire International, Lee USA, Tioga, Beach Ridge, Stafford, Nazareth, Waterford, Thunder Road, Holland in New York, Thompson in Connecticut, Lime Rock, Watkins Glen, Unity in Maine, Airborne, Riverside and Groveton, Oxford Circuit, Riverside and Quebec, Hiawatha in Ontario, and New Smyrna in Florida. Brad Layton won on New England's biggest track, New Hampshire Speedway, and its smallest tracks, Thunder Road is an example, and on 3 of the Busch North road courses. His record makes it clear that Brad Layton is one of the top guys in New England auto racing history. He could have gone further in the sport had he not devoted himself to business. So he had it all. Racing wins, racing championships, and a successful business career he built for himself. Brad, congratulations on a wonderful career. You have truly earned your way into the New England Auto Racing Hall of Fame.
Thanks, Dick. That was amazing. Not sure where you get stats, but there's no way I won that many races. But we'll take it. Dick himself next weekend is going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame for broadcasting. So Mike as well. So we're all looking forward to that as well. Yeah. It's truly, you know, it's surreal for me. I remember going to Beech Ridge, watching Dick race with the modifieds up there when he was well known for the scarf flying around his head, most of the time over his eyes based on his racing quality. I had to throw that in there. And no, it's just truly an honor to be here, guys. And there's a lot of time that was put in to get me here. Certainly on the stats part of it. Penny, you're an amazing person. John, I got to hit you with this. Your direction sucked. Took us 35 minutes to find a Bud Light last night. But Penny, you're, what you've done for me and my family and in Grisco racing over a decade has been truly remarkable. And thanks for making me look good on all these, one-liners and et cetera. But so I truly appreciate that, and thanks for being a friend. Congrats to all of the other recipients here. You guys are amazing. I'm not sure. You must have open space for me. So, but you guys are just a truly amazing crowd, and just to hear the stories is certainly rewarding to me to hear very similar situations that I had coming up through my career. I remember I was a little bit older. Didn't have my license, and I was fairly always competitive doing something, and running lawnmowers or bicycles, racing around the house. And my brother was truly the mechanic of the family, and my dad as well. So my brother was racing snowmobiles on the ice, and I just had to try it. And my dad was a pretty tough guy. We only had a newspaper that came out once a week, and I ran a race that weekend prior, and our paper came out on Wednesday, and I saw my dad reading it, and I'm like, oh man, I'm busted. And they had the stats in there, of course, and he hollers at me, Bradley, yeah, come out here. He says, you can't beat your brother, don't bother racing. I'm like, all right, baby, game on. So, yeah, from there, my brother and dad built cars for me. I am not that mechanically inclined. I'm way better beating them up, aren't I, boys, than I am fixing them. So they did that and built a couple cars. I remember my dad saying, I think I ran the first 2 races and it literally wore out the brakes in the car. And he goes like, you can't win a race with your brakes on. I said, Dad, this car weighs 5,000 pounds. We're racing against guys that are 3,000 pounds. We just got to lose a lot of weight. So my brother went to work on that and built the cars for Beech Ridge Motor Speedway, where I really started taking racing a little bit more serious. He was amazing builder. The brotherly love thing. We always fought, but we were fighting for the same thing and didn't realize it. So we ran Beech Ridge for quite a few years, focused on winning some championships, and we were successful in that. One night, I remember Bobby Gahan was racing modifieds there as well as the ACT Tour, and he was wanted me to start his modified in the back and just start and stop so he could get the points. So I did that. And we got in the car, and I'm like, holy shit, a motor sticking up front. There's a tiny little windshield. I was pretty scared, frankly. And so I went out and practiced the car, and I did pretty well with it. And his crew, I guess he had 2 guys there that night because it was just start and stop. And he goes, well, if you're comfortable with the car, he says, you don't have to stop. And I said, well, all right. So I remember starting in the back, I don't know, 20-some cars, and I worked my way up to third, and I rubbed tires with Willie Elliott at the time, and that thing went up on 2 tires, and I hit the pits real quick. And so long story, Gardner and June Levitt happened to be there, and they saw me. And they asked me if I had any interest in running the ACT tour, and I'm like, sure. I mean, I just came out of a street stock. So I guess my point is if I took my whole career as I look at it now, and I just was very careful surrounding myself with really, really good people and much more talented than I am. And then with my parents, my dad and brother, and certainly with Gardner and June, we had some success. We won Rookie of the Year, and I guess we ran a couple years with them, and then it was we were in Mossport, Canada, and it was pouring rain out. I remember it, and they had pit stop. Curly had pit stop challenges back then because he ran the stock pot. So whatever team he wanted to win won, but that's okay. So it was raining, and I looked over to my far right, and there was this huge umbrella with these 2 tall people, and it happened to be the Griswolds, Steve and Peg. And they offered me underneath the umbrella, and we sat there and chatted for, God, I don't know, Peg, maybe 40 minutes. Happiest rainstorm I ever sat through. And they both were asking what my passion and desire was. And I'm like, at this point, I hadn't won a race. I'm like, I just want to win a race. So they decided they would potentially have 2 race teams. So we had to put a second team together. And I think at that point, Stan Reserve had decided to resign from being the tech, and Brian and Carl Osher from Fairfax, Vermont, were they were teching for Curly, but I knew they were Robbie Crouch's crew, and I'm thinking, all right, surround yourself with very successful people. So I asked these guys if they wanted to go back racing, and thankfully they did. So we put that team together, Grisco Racing, and had a lot of success with that. There's no question. And I want to thank you guys for coming today. We had so many good memories. Some we can't talk about, but it was great. But I got to tell you, I had no idea the impact of that rainy day delay was going to be on my life. Met Peg and Steve. They just taught me trust, honor, respect. It was just an amazing relationship we continue to have. And you mentored me through everything. It's been so amazing. And both of my boys are here today, and they've seen all that, and it's just infectious. It really is. And now I lost my spot. This is bullshit. So we lost Steve on February 10th, 2013. And it was just something, the wind came out of my sail like you read about. And I quickly realized it wasn't the laps we led, the championships we fought for. It was more about people, surrounding yourself with the right people. So we're still here today, blessed with Peg, such an amazing woman. And I just want to thank you, Peg, for everything you've done for me and my family. It's been amazing and continues to be. However, my tax bill is way higher than it was before I met you. I'm actually pretty nervous up here. I don't know why. It's like, I feel like I'm at my 8th grade spelling bee. When they asked me to spell race, I tried to buy 2 vowels. It didn't work out. Part of that, my decision to back out of racing a little bit. I know I was offered a race once, and Lynn, my biggest supporter, couldn't come because our oldest son Nick was in a championship playoff for baseball, and her and I were back and forth on the phone. And back then, it wasn't as easy as it is today, so it was a little pain. But long story short, Nick ended up winning the championship and scoring the winning run, and that's just it was just a hollow part in my heart. So I knew at that point it was time to spend some time focusing more on business, and certainly as much as I could with the family. And thanks for not following in my footsteps. Man, oh man, I might be able to retire now. And Brenty, my youngest, I remember he had a short stint in go-karts. We were at Beach Ridge, which is my home track, and my boys over there and gals were, we were there for the bush race, and you guys came up a night early, and Brent ended up winning. Way more talent than I ever had. And my boys, they all rushed him, right? And he's like, oh my God. So during the week, he goes, Dad, I don't really want to race anymore. I'm like, dude, you just want to race. It's like your second race. He goes, yeah, I just want to practice. He doesn't like the limelight. He's just kind of a quiet, says a few words, means what he says. And it's just really proud of you, man. You've done it. And congratulations on your new venture. He proposed to his girl Friday, so yeah. Did I mention girl? So we're not paying for the wedding. Nick, dude, you weren't even 20. You wrecked 2 cars and burned one. Thank God you didn't follow that. So, I guess one of my most memorable races was Nick spotted for me at Loudon, and I'm sitting there on the front stretch with my guys, and I'm thinking, what the hell is wrong with you? This kid's spotting. He's just wrecked 2 cars and burned one. This is not going to work out. So we did a great job. We ended up winning that race, and the last lap, he just said, bring it home, Pops. And I just truly cried in my helmet. I was actually a little mad because you said it too early. We had like a half a lap to go, but that was a pretty special moment for me, Nick. I probably never shared that with you. No. Lynn, my sister told you 37 years ago to run. I thought he was smarter than that. What a friend. What a love. What a soulmate. What a supporter. Just a really, really nice person that, I'm so honored to be your husband. It's just amazing. The honesty part could have been a little bit lighter on the ride home, though, from the races. Let's face it, she even sided one night with Dion. Well, that really wasn't his fault. Baloney. So, I want to thank my guys that came. Really means a lot to me. Guys, I had no idea you were coming. I thought I had table 24 with no one in it. Cheap date, though, let's face it. Again, in closing, there was and continue to be so many more talented drivers than me. I've been so fortunate and blessed to have opportunities, as you heard, racing with my family. Gardner and June saw me, and Steve and Peg, and just it went on and on and on. It just segued into what ended up being tonight, which is I truly mean this. You guys I'm with quite a crowd, and I'm honored to be part of the family now. So if I forgot anybody or anything, I do apologize because she told me only take 10 minutes. So, and what a great job here tonight, guys. Thank you. Well, it takes him 4 hours to put his rings on.
Our next presenter, my friends probably only know him from his appearance on Talladega Nights, The Ballad of Ricky Bobby. They're probably the same ones who go, Dave, what do you like about cars just going around in a circle? I'm surprised they're still on the friends list. But I first heard him at Riverside Park. It's always going to be Riverside Park. Describing the exploits of my first ever sports hero, Billy Greco. Battling with Bob Pulvereri, Bobby Stefanik. And then when Billy felt he got cheated out of a Riverside 500, and if you asked him, and if he was still here, he would still be mad about it, he went to Riverside Park. And then I got to hear him talk about 3 other men who became my heroes in this sport, Eddie Flimke, Freddie DeSaro, and Bugsy Stevens. But the fact that the NEAR Board of Directors, because I said this to him, and I also said this to Jack Yaroot, there's been 4 people that have been the master of ceremonies for NEAR. Jack Yaroot, Matt Buckler, who I've heard in my headsets for 17 years, and this gentleman. And it absolutely scares the hell out of me, because in my mind, one of these is not like the other. It's my honor to bring to the podium to induct Andy Santerre, Mr. Mike Joy.
You're all clapping because this is the last presentation of the evening. Is thing on? Thank you, and thanks for having me. I want to thank my son Scott, who's 24, for being here and doesn't recognize hardly anybody in this room, but he's heard a lot of the stories. And my business partner John Holland, we were the first commercial sponsor for the NEAR Hall of Fame. And his buddy Dave Monaco. We've traveled a lot of roads together. Had a lot of fun. Thanks for being here. There are quite a number of people who have plaques on the wall, not today, but on the NEAR wall, who had their lives taken too soon by the sport we love. People who died on the track or on the way to the track. This is probably the first induction of a racer whose life was saved by this sport. Andy Santerre is 17 years old. He's lying in a hospital in intensive care. He might not make it. When Andy was a boy, his dad had a tow truck, and his dad would take Andy and haul a car up to the old half-mile dirt Cherryfield Speedway, where his dad, before Andy was born, had won a whole lot of races. And he'd tow a car up there and turn him loose. And Andy'd get to drive on dirt, at a very young age. But there was nowhere in Maine for a kid to go auto racing before he got his driver's license. There was no go-karts. There were no Legends cars or Bandoleros or anything like the opportunities the kids have today. So at 17, Andy has a rare disease. He's lying in intensive care. His lungs had collapsed. His kidneys had stopped working. Machines were keeping Andy alive. And a friend comes to visit. He's carrying a Kenny Schrader die-cast car. And he tells Andy, who can hear him but can't answer back, he said, "Come on, you got to get up and get out of here. We're going racing." And the rest, as they say, is history. Andy did just that. Got into a car at 19, raced at local tracks. I am not going to give you his entire career because by that time dinner will be served. However, there are a few highlights. And his career is well detailed in today's program. You can read it there. Raced at a lot of tracks and worked his way up, tried the ACT Series, was Rookie of the Year in Busch Grand National North, got a win, got third in points, and prophetically was named Most Popular Driver. Because one of the things that Andy has excelled at throughout his entire racing career as a driver, as an owner, as a team manager, is surrounding himself with fantastic people. People want to be associated with Andy's racing. Engine builders, crew chiefs, car owners, sponsors, many of whom are here today. I think half the state of Maine is here to laugh at Brad's jokes and honor Andy Santerre. If Brad Layton is not his generation's Clint Boyer, I just don't know what. Totally unfiltered, great speech. Congratulations to all of today's inductees. So Andy attracted a lot of great talent to help him in his racing endeavors. Along the way, met and married the love of his life, started a great family who are here today with him. Decided to go racing south. Rookie of the Year in Busch Grand National with a new team, won the pole at Richmond, and then started out the very next season full of promise with a bad crash at Daytona, broke his leg. But again, people wanted to help Andy. So an experimental program at Wake Forest Medical Center in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, took Andy's 6-month expected rehabilitation and had him back in the car in 3 months and competing and going on and winning. He has a Busch Grand National win at Pikes Peak. It came on the heels of a North win at Loudon. Boy, July of 99 was a great month after that rehab. So I don't want to detail Andy's career, but I do want to talk about one race in particular that I was watching this morning on YouTube. Bristol, Tennessee. Fastest 5/8 mile in the country. And here's Andy with his small team, no sponsor, just a plain white race car. And Andy finds himself in the lead because his crew chief, Stan Meserve, who stands here tonight, told our Fox pit reporter, Dick Berggren, who's here today, we've got a long run car. We're going to leave him out there on old tires. We're going to run longer than anybody else. We're going to take track position, and we're going to be in good shape to win this thing. Well, what he didn't tell Dick on the air, which I learned at the table this afternoon, you know how everybody likes to help Andy? Well, who is he battling for the lead in this race but Kevin Harvick, who's going to go on to win that 2001 Busch Series championship. And Kevin's running second, and Andy's leading a lot of that race. And Kevin calls down to his crew chief and goes, who's leading this thing? Who's in that white car? Well, it's Andy Santerre. And Kevin is a very quick study. You're going to enjoy him on Fox next year. It took him all of one lap to deduce that his crew chief had a close personal relationship with Andy Santerre's sister, Luann, who's also here today. And Kevin knew right then and there what setup Andy had on that race car, because it was exactly the same as his. And he keys the radio and he tells his crew chief, if he wins this race, I am going to kick your ass. Andy led 75 laps that day. Finally did have to stop. Coming back up through the pack, got taken out by a lap car. But everybody, including my broadcast partners, Larry McReynolds and Darrell Waltrip, took great notice how competitive that car was that day. Well, after that one Busch Series win and a lot of success, Andy decided that, well, we'll go back to the Busch North Series. But instead of doing it the traditional way and moving his operation back up to northern New England, he raced out in North Carolina, had a shop there, had a team there, had people there. So he races in Busch Grand National North and wins the championship 4 consecutive years, 2002 to 5, and that is why he is being honored on this stage today. And then at the end of 2005, after that 4th consecutive championship, he took off his helmet and retired. To family and to team ownership and then team management, Rev Racing, NASCAR's diversity program, and then after another year, decided racing's been a lot of fun, but we're moving back to Maine, where you'll find him today, taking care of a great classic car collection and having a lot of fun. And when he called and said, "Would you do this induction?" Well, everybody wants to help Andy, right? There's absolutely no way I could say no. So I'm very honored to be here because Andy Santerre gave a lot to racing. He got a lot from racing. After all, it was racing that saved his life. So on this 5th day of November 2023, it is my great honor to induct Andy Santerre into the New England Auto Racing Hall of Fame.
Mike's been a big part of my career over the years. And, I'm just honored that he could come here and do this. I know he's a busy guy, and when I found out I was going in, he was the first call. So, but also my daughter Sarah's gonna. I guess she'll bring it up. But I have the first car, my first race car, and I want you guys to see it. You can bring it up now and set it in the chair. Mike talked a little bit about it. He and I didn't know what each other was going to talk about, so it was kind of cool. But this car here, you'll hear a little bit more in my speech, but I'll set it on the chair so you can see. By the way, it's the number 25 Folgers Kenny Schrader car. This is 35 years old. It's been in my bedroom that I grew up in as a kid at my mom's house, and I had to glue a few pieces back together, but it's pretty cool. It still looks pretty good. Want to thank April May for working with us with all the seating arrangements, because we had a few changes along the way, and my wife, she's used to doing banquets and whatnot, so every time I'd tell her, "Hey, can you change this seat or find that?" She said, "You're going to make me call her again? You know how much she has going on?" So thank you very much for all you've done. But it's an honor to get inducted today. It's even more special because I'm going into the Hall of Fame with two of my good friends, Brad Layton and Teddy Marsh. Congrats to both of you, and congratulations to all of this year's inductees. Being recognized as so many great drivers from New England is an honor. A big thank you to Mike Joy for the introduction. Mike was the first person I thought of when I was asked who I would like to do my introduction. Mike paid me the greatest compliment of my racing career at my last championship banquet in 2005. He spoke about a few drivers who never made it to the big dance but had the talent. Mike named Sam Ard, Richie Evans, and me. It was a huge compliment, to say the least, but excuse me, one I'll never forget. Thank you, Mike. So Mike and John Holland from New England Race Fuels both helped me a lot as I climbed the racing ladder. I know John's here today, and wanted to mention that they both helped me a lot, and they supplied me with Sunoco race fuel throughout my racing career. And as a New England native, Mike always spoke highly of me on the national broadcast and promoted my name throughout the NASCAR industry. My father, Louis Santerre, who Mike mentioned earlier, he grew me to race at a young age. He had a tow truck and a junkyard in the backyard and raced himself in the 60s before I was born. Our family home in Cherryfield, Maine is at the entrance to the old Cherryfield Speedway. At the young age of 5, my dad would have me stand in the seat and steer old cars while he pushed me with his wrecker tow truck. So my grandmother didn't really like that, and my mother was always yelling at us, but my father told him to get back in the house. He's fine. But I was driving around that old junkyard as soon as I could reach the pedals. Dad had a hard time. Dad had a hard time going to stock car races. I was interested in stock car racing, and I'd mention it to Dad because I'd heard all the stories, but I never got to see my dad race. He stopped racing in 1968, and that was the year I was born. So I'd asked him to take me, but he had a hard time going to the stock car races because he told me it was a sickness. And at the time, I had no idea what he meant, but I sure do now. He would take me to Beach Ridge every year on his motorcycle, and it was quite a trip. We would make the 4-hour trip, watch the races, and stay in a motel, which was a big deal from a kid from Cherryfield. I looked forward to that trip every year for my birthday until I became a teenager and I was too cool to ride on the back. But my dad really loved the dirt at the Ridge. We lost Dad in 2020, but he would have been proud to be here with us tonight. My mom, Jessie, doesn't leave home much these days, but she is proud of my accomplishments on and off the track. I call her every morning on my way to work to check in. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for all your sacrifices. I also want to thank my 3 sisters who are here tonight. They've always had my back, and it means a lot to have you here with me to celebrate. Lori, Julie, and Luann. I couldn't have gotten into the Hall of Fame alone, but my speech tonight is about all the people who made it possible for me to be standing here today receiving this award. My racing career started a lot differently than most. My cousin, David Dow, and I talked about building a stock car in the fall of 1987. I had bought a 77 Chevy Nova from his classmate and had it in my dad's garage for us to start building around Christmas that year. A few days later, I became very ill very quickly and ended up in the hospital right after New Year's Eve in 1988. The doctors diagnosed me with Guillain-Barré syndrome. It's a virus that attacks the central nervous system and muscular systems, and I ended up paralyzed and in intensive care on a ventilator fighting for my life. David Dow showed up in the ICU with my first stock car, and I brought it here today so you could all see it. It's the 25 Folgers car. David told me, get your ass out of that bed. We're going racing. And I spent 87 days in the hospital, 33 days on that ventilator. My kidneys failed, my lungs collapsed. But seeing that car on the nightstand gave me the motivation I needed to get out of the hospital. I was confined to a wheelchair for a while after going home, and I spent months learning to walk again. By the end of that summer, I was getting better, and I purchased my first car with David's help and a bank loan, and we prepared that car to race over the winter. I raced for the first time at Speedway 95 the following season. We got our first win about halfway through the season, and they tore my engine down in tech. Although we were legal, we had to get parts to reassemble the engine. So the engine that came with the car was built at Butler & McMaster Automotive, a well-known engine shop in Hollowell, Maine. I called to get parts and spoke to Dave McMaster, one of the owners. That phone call was the start of a lifelong friendship. We won a few races that year, but my buddy David Dow wanted to go further. We decided to build a new car and engine and try to win a championship. I was an oil truck driver, and he was a fireman. So we needed a lot of help to pull that off, because neither one of us had a whole lot of money. So we were introduced to Stan Meserve, the current Hall of Famer, at Distance Racing Products in Unity, Maine. And he told us to bring him a Camaro, and he'd build us a new race car. My next stop was to see Dave McMaster about a new engine, and he agreed to work with us. We got the car and engine from 2 of the best guys in the business, and went out and won that championship that year with the financial backing of 2 great friends of mine, Steve Cole and Wayne Wright. Winning my first championship was a highlight, but the friendships I developed with Stan and Dave are what helped me progress in my racing career. Stan and his wife Diane have been great friends and mentors to Sue and I over the past 30 years, and we made a lot of memories together with more still to come. Stan and I made the trip from sunny southern Florida to be here with us today. We love you guys, and Stan, it's an honor to be in the Hall of Fame with you, my friend. Dave McMaster has been one of my best friends over the past 30 plus years. We spent thousands of hours working on race cars, engines, and we even snowmobiled together every winter. We even built my new garage together. But I had to tell Dave to leave his micrometer at home and use a tape measure. He is pretty particular, to say the least. Dave gave me and Sue a place to live early in my career, and at one point even gave me a job. Dave's been a big part of my racing career, but more than racing, Dave taught me a lot about life, and I know I can count on him for anything, anytime. I can't thank you enough for all you've done for me, Dave, over the years. Thank you. So in 1991, David Dow and I decided to run some ACT Tour races. We sold our Camaro, our championship Camaro. We sold at the last race at Unity. We won the race, and a guy that had won the lottery wanted that car, and it was a perfect time to sell it. So we sold that car that night, and we went right to Stan and said, we need an ACT Tour car. Well, they were super late models at the time. They were pretty expensive. Stan says, I've got a beauty. So he said, so we bought the car. It was a used Dan Beatty car that Stan had taken in on trade, and we got it ready. Dave built us a new engine, and we went to Lee Speedway opening day for the ACT rookie race. We won the rookie race that day, but destroyed the car in a heat race the next day and had no more money. On the quiet ride home, I remember in a Dodge pickup, single cab with an open trailer, I asked David, I said, what are we going to do? And I'll never forget that conversation. Dave said he would sell his old lady's car, and we could use that money to have Stan fix the race car. So she was sitting in the middle, and she didn't say much that day, but when we got home on Monday morning, he sold his old lady's Buick. So we got the car stripped down, took it down to Stan, and he put all new parts, new front clip and all that, and David's wife was fine with it. So sadly, we lost David to a brain tumor in 2018. He would have been so proud of this Hall of Fame induction, and without him, it wouldn't have been possible. Toward the end of the 1992 season, Dave McMaster called me and asked me if I wanted to test the Busch North car. He said that the O'Connor's NASCAR North team was looking for a driver. I didn't know anything about the NASCAR North cars, but I sure did like the idea of driving a car that I didn't have to pay for. And my mom and dad liked that too. So I tested the car at my local track, Speedway 95 in Bangor, for Mike and Pam O'Connor, and they offered me the ride and a chance to race for the Rookie of the Year in 1993 on the NASCAR North Series. Mike and Pam also gave me a job working in the shop, and I learned so much during the 2 years I drove for them. They treated me like a son, and I'll never forget my first win at Apple Valley Speedway, driving the famed number 15 O'Connor GMC Lumina. Thank you for all you've done for me, Mike and Pam, and for treating me like a son. I greatly appreciate it. Lots of amazing things happened to me that night in Apple Valley, New York. I got my first NASCAR win. I met my future wife at the track just before qualifying. I didn't know it was going to happen that night, but she was doing a marketing internship at Watkins Glen Speedway and was at the race interviewing drivers for the upcoming race at the Glen. I saw her the very next night at Holland Speedway and decided that I needed to know more about her. So we raced at the Glen the following week, and I got her number. I called her the next day, and we went on our first date to Jennerstown Speedway the next week, and the rest is history. I proposed to her in 1995 in Victory Lane at Thompson Speedway after getting my first win as an owner driver. She said yes, and we married in 1996. She has been my rock for about 30 years, and I couldn't have done this without her. Thank you, babe. I met many influential people in the mid-90s, including Steve and Peter Prescott from Team EJP. EJP has sponsored me my entire racing career. I'm proud to say I am employed there now and take care of a beautiful car collection. Steve Prescott is here with us today. I appreciate all your family has done for me over the years and for your continued friendship. Thank you, Steve. I want to mention Quint Bovair from QBR Racing. Quint helped me a lot when I started my own Busch North team. I really didn't have a whole lot of money, and but I knew I needed to build a car if I was going to continue to race. And we went up to Quint's, and he basically gave me a Laughlin chassis and put a body on it for me and told me to pay him whenever I could come up with it. He knew I was good for it. So thank you to Quint. Dale Averill is here with us today. He's another longtime friend and supporter. Dale designed all my race car paint schemes and spotted for me during my championship seasons. Thank you so much, Dale and Trish, for coming to celebrate with us today. So Sue and I moved south to run in the NASCAR Busch Series in 1998. I won Rookie of the Year and earned a pole at Richmond, but I was involved in a crash on lap 18 at the first race of the 1999 season at Daytona and broke my leg. I spent a week in the hospital and 3 months of rehab before getting back into the driver's seat. The highlight of that season was my first and only Busch Series win at Pikes Peak in Colorado. In 2000, I was hired to drive a part-time schedule in the Busch Series with Team Renzi Motorsports. So I decided to build my own Busch North car to run a limited schedule up here in the Northeast, which was my home. My good friend, Dave Davis, was building cars and hanging bodies in North Carolina. He and I had met in Maine back in 1996 when he hung a few bodies for me before we both went south at about the same time. Dave let me build my car in his shop in Denver, North Carolina. His crew, they called me Lightning Santerre, as I lightened every part I could before I installed it. So I then hooked up with Teddy Marsh and Marsh Racing, and you all know Teddy, because he's here today. And his crew fielded the car for me that year out of Old Lyme, Connecticut. We won 2 out of 3 of those races that year, including New Hampshire and Watkins Glen, which were the biggest purses that year. And I needed that to pay for that car. So Teddy and I have remained great friends, and Dave Davis and his wife Terry are living back in Maine now, so Dave and I spend a lot of time together, and we also snowmobile together. That's the thing to do in Maine in the winter. Thank you, Dave and Terry, for being here. And thank you to Teddy Marsh and his wife, Linda. And congrats on your induction today, Teddy, as well. In 2001, I had a great opportunity to start my own Busch Series race team with a good friend, Mike Reese. We had sponsorship to run 6 races that year and had high hopes to gain sponsorship to do a full season. As Mike mentioned earlier, that was the year that we should have won Bristol, but it didn't work out. But Stan Reserve was my crew chief that year, and we almost won a couple races. The economy tanked after 9/11, so I decided to close the Busch shop and decided to go back racing the Busch East Series full-time in 2002. We had 23 races in the Northeast that year, and I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina. I knew it would be a lot of commuting and that I couldn't do it alone. I had a new dually and a single-car trailer, enclosed trailer, but I knew there's no way I was going to drive that many miles and race by myself. So I leaned on my good friend, Mike French. He's better known as Tex, with a cowboy hat. You've seen him today. I leaned on him to help me drive my race hauler. Tex and Alice made the trip from South Carolina to surprise me here today. We won the championship that year, and there's no way I could have done it without you, Tex. Thank you very much. This isn't in my speech, but my wife and Tex, they got me pretty good yesterday. Tex has a collection of old Chevy Chevelles, and Camaros and Chevelles are my favorite cars. I would take that over anything. And I told Tex, one day I'm going to own one of your Chevelles. So we made a deal a few years ago that I was going to have his 66 Malibu. And we've never been able to arrange it so I could get it and get down there and haul it back. It's never worked out. So yesterday, my wife tricked me into going to Walmart to get drinks for the little party we were having last night. But lo and behold, I didn't know Tex was going to be there. I didn't know he was able to make it. But as we got there, and Tex and Alice surprised us, and then as we were leaving the parking lot, I saw Tex's hauler, or his truck, his dually, with an open trailer, and there's the 66 Chevelle. So, another good moment for sure. So, I'm almost done. Thank you. So in 2003 and 2004, I won the championship driving for Bessie Motorsports in the Aubuchon Hardware Chevrolet. These were 2 of my best years I ever had competitiveness-wise in racing. Thank you to Joe Bessie and Nancy Bessie for your support. Sue and I welcomed our first child, Sarah, in 2003. She's never met a stranger, and we are so proud of the young lady she has become. 4 years later, we welcomed Sammy into the world. She is our athlete and inherited both mine and Sue's competitiveness. She's a great kid, and we are very proud of her, too. Sammy and Sarah are here with us today, along with Sarah's boyfriend, Tyler. My girls mean the world to me. So my last year of driving was for Grisco Racing in 2005. Steve and Peg Griswold had been our friends and competitors for years, and they asked me to manage their team with the hopes of winning another championship. I had not planned on racing that year. I was going to prepare the cars for Mike Stefanik and Brad Layton. But after Steve and Peg's first visit to the shop in North Carolina, Peg made it a point to tell Steve that I would be driving. We didn't have a sponsor at that point, but she was adamant it was going to happen, so we got a car ready and fielded a 3-car team. We all had success that year and ended up 1-2 in the championship points, but the best part of the whole deal is the lasting friendships we made with Steve and Peg, Mike and Julie Stefanik, and Brad and Lynn Layton. Thank you, Peg, for fighting to put me in the car. I retired as a champion because of you. Peg is here with us today, celebrating mine and Brad's inductions. We lost Steve, unfortunately, in 2013, but I know the big guy's looking down at Brad and I right now with his big grin. He's a happy guy. I want to mention a few more people who made it possible for me to be standing here today. Roger Tryon, my crew chief for all 4 championships. Couldn't have done it without you, Rog. And thank you for all the great years. And Tracy, thank you for letting him help me every weekend. So, I want to thank all the fans, the officials, crew members, sponsors who have made my career possible. And thanks to everyone who has helped me over the years. I am truly blessed, and I will treasure this award forever. Thank you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our induction ceremonies. before we sign off and send everybody, and we hope to see you in 2024, I may not have seen all of you race. I'm a kid from the center of Connecticut. As I said, Mike, Riverside Park was my original home, and then went to Stafford, but went to Plainville, Thompson, Waterford, Islip, wherever Billy raced. The fact that I'm a voice at the 3 remaining Connecticut tracks still amazes me. I've gotten to work with Hall of Famers like John Spence, Matt Buckler, Ben Dodge, who started me, Matt Buckler, who started me, Pete Falcone. But all of you in this room and all the Hall of Famers did one thing, no matter where you raced, that the Hall of Famers that I know did for me. I'm sure there were boys and girls that went home at night, maybe wanting to write the words that you write, maybe wanted to be an announcer like I've gotten to be, or wanted to race just like you do, and filled their nights, their dreams with that dream. I thank you all Hall of Famers, for them and for myself, for what you've given to all of us. Thank you very much. And with that, I bring to a close the 2024, 23. Boy, I'm really pushing it. I'm still dizzy because the racing season ended last night. So thank you again, everyone. I look forward to seeing you next year at the 2024 Hall of Fame ceremony induction. Good night, everyone, and have a great holiday season.